Australia's $5 billion taxi industry has for years faced claims of overcharging customers, exploiting drivers and abusing its monopoly power. Governments have been curiously reluctant to upset the status quo, but now the former head of the competition watchdog, Allan Fels, has been unleashed on the cab trade, and he has the billion-dollar cab charge monopoly in his sights. It's set him on a collision course with Australia's taxi kingpin and politicians past and present, as Greg Hoy reports.
$200 million taxi trips are taken in Australia annually.
Every attempt to get some competition in the industry has been blocked. No government in Australia has been prepared to take more than very minor measures. They don't want to break the links between their political parties and the networks.
The industry is dysfunctional, and when it comes to an arrangement between high-level political figures and the upper echelons of the taxi industry, it seems very close.
Although fares are set by government, there's a great divide between big profits at the top of the taxi food chain, where taxi plates can trade for as much as $500,000, and many of the 66,000 cabbies who literally drive the industry. In Melbourne, that involves thousands of poorly trained Indian migrants or students who've long protested. They're often paid well below the minimum wage.
And they make around $200 on the meter. So out of 200, they get $100. Divide by 12 hours. It's nearly $8 an hour.
The same story is told in other states. Sydney driver Michael Jules.
We're not wage slaves, we're just slaves.
Finally, the Victorian government has broken ranks with other states, appointing Allan Fels, head of a taxi inquiry, to recommend and implement sweeping reforms. The draft plan announced today includes legislation to boost competition and wages, entitlements and training for drivers.
Driver wages just have to go up for them to get a better deal, but also to attract better drivers.
We need reform across the country, and we need to really end the largely monopoly power that some of the industry have, particularly CabCharge.
CabCharge really runs the roost.
Unavailable for interview, but towering over the top of the entire taxi industry and its representative associations is this man. Now 86 years old, Reg Commode is founder and the highly paid force behind the cab empire, CabCharge, which turns over $1 billion a year. Firstly, by controlling electronic payments in 97% of Australian taxis and limousines for a hefty 10% cut of fares.
10% is a rip-off.
The CabCharge fee of 10% is clearly far too high. We believe it should be cut to the order of 5%.
But CabCharge has many tentacles which entangle the taxi industry. It's also the largest owner-operator of taxis in Australia, controls the biggest booking and dispatch service, vehicle leasing, loans, labour hire, meters, insurance, driver training, government-contracted bus services as half-owner of ComfortDelGro CabCharge, and CabCharge mostly controls government-subsidised disability taxi services, for which some state governments insist all taxis use CabCharge's payment system.
CabCharge is the government regulation. You have to have this one.
We think that needs to be changed in the interests of competition so that other machines can be used.
So Victoria seems set to be the first cab off the reform rank, leaving considerable consternation about the lack of reform in other states, particularly the biggest, New South Wales, home and headquarters of CabCharge.
CabCharge have a very heavy influence on both the Liberal and the Labor Party governments, and there's no real control.
There are many ways in which powerful business interests can influence political parties and ministers.
The major parties periodically have talked about the need for change, but they have failed to do so, and we've seen this once again with Premier Barry O'Farrell.
7:30 requested an interview with both New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell and the New South Wales Transport Minister to discuss calls for taxi reform and to reduce the influence of powerful industry players. Both declined to be interviewed.
Mr O'Farrell really does need to act.
Green Senator Lee Rhiannon helped establish a parliamentary inquiry and is angry its key findings have been ignored. She believes Cabcharge and the New South Wales Taxi Council, which share this building and are closely interrelated, have carefully cultivated support of New South Wales politicians.
But it's not healthy.
Barry O'Farrell was elected Premier a year ago. Prior to then, former Labor Premier Neville Wran served for 10 years on the Cabcharge board and is still a director of Comfort Del Gro Cabcharge. But in the 8 years until June 2011, the following flow of donations were made by Cabcharge to both major parties in New South Wales, on top of a parallel flow of funds from the New South Wales Taxi Council.
Mr Commode and Cabcharge appear to have enormous influence over the New South Wales Taxi Council, and we're also aware in Queensland, South Australia and Victoria political donations have been made by the taxi industry to Labor and the coalition parties.
7:30 asked New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell to confirm if Cabcharge chairman Reg Commode was a guest at his wedding, as has been reported, but we received no response. Meantime, Victoria's inquiry has set Professor Alan Fells on a collision course with Cabcharge, Reg Commode, his supporters and other taxi networks.
The story is much the same everywhere in Australia. In Victoria, every taxi must belong to a network. They should have the choice of not belonging to a network.
But the inquiry's plan to sell taxi licences to owner-operators for just $20,000 a year for 5 years to encourage far greater competition may yet cause the greatest backlash of all.
The taxi licence of $500,000 is in effect incorporated into prices. Now a much, much lower allowance would be built into prices. Yes, there will be howls of protest over the licensing reforms, but we cannot hold the public to hostage to keeping up the value of licences at $500,000.
This debate has only just begun, even if it's been a long time coming.
And 7:30 did ask Cabcharge's Mr Commode for an interview, but he declined. Greg Hoy with that report.